The 2021-2022 NBA schedule is released, and the Suns are among the top teams in the NBA with national television games. We'll talk about the schedule, and we'll use that as a way to talk about what this team might look like in the NBA standings in 2022. All of that coming up next on Locked On Phoenix Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, covering the Suns and the NBA at SB Nation, as well as Dime Magazine. Follow me on Twitter at Brendon Kleen 14. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. It is a Monday. It is an off-season Monday, but it's a Monday nevertheless, which means Brandon is joining us. We're going to talk about the schedule, like I said, talk about the Suns' place in all this stuff. The schedule kind of is the last domino to fall here. But Brandon, how are you doing today? How was your weekend?
Good. It's good to be back. And, the schedule release is always a nice way for fans that have something else to complain about. Or like between that and the 2K rankings, it just feels like everything's just kind of crazy right now.
Hey, I mean, it gives us stuff to talk about. It gives fans some juice during the off season, so can't necessarily complain. But I mean, the biggest thing is with the schedule. Let's start there. I talked about it when the Christmas and the opening week schedules got released last week a bit. It's kind of crazy to just have like the Suns will just be in the conversation like every day. I mean,
34 nationally televised games. Like that's just insane.
It's crazy and it's cool. And I think, for a long time, whether it was like Devin Booker or whatever nitpick that Suns fans had that national media, quote unquote, didn't pay attention to, it's not really going to be the case anymore. And I mean, we'll start with the positive, but I also think there's some negatives that I think people aren't necessarily prepared for. Of this team is everybody's going to have an opinion on the Suns next year. The Suns snuck up on people last year. That's not really going to be the case in 2022 because the national ESPN people of the world or the Athletic or, the Ringer, these people are going to watch the Suns every single day and they're going to have some opinions. It's going to be kind of fun, but I think it'll maybe rub some people the wrong way as well.
Yeah, I look at it as a complete positive though, just because now at least, even if it's just off of like a hot take after one game that someone watches, at least they're basing it off of watching the Suns, which in the past was never the case. So even if like there are some cherry picked moments or like nights where the Suns just don't bring it on the national stage, which it's going to happen. No team's going to go 34-0 on their national
let's set
games.
Expectations high. It's the off season. It's going to be a sweep. 34-0.
Sure.
Just predict
82-0. Yeah, lock it in. But yeah, no, I'm pretty excited just because now, at least for the most part, at least the smart basketball people that I care about their opinions are going to be watching the Suns a lot more. But that does come with like the other side of the coin, like you mentioned, with some of the hot takes and stuff like that. So I think the world's going to learn a lot more about the Suns, and I think the run to the finals too obviously helped, but they're not going to be able to catch anyone off guard this time.
No, they're not. And again, like you said, 34 nationally televised games. Some highlights there that I'll point out. We don't see the Bucks until February 10th, and it'll be a home game, and it'll be on national TV, as will the next one on March 6th in Milwaukee, both nationally televised, which makes a ton of sense. I thought we might get that game on Christmas or the opening week, but schedule with it being such a far trip, I get it. So those will be really exciting, and we'll have to wait a little while to see them. I really like the fact that the Nuggets and the Lakers games are opening week. We already knew that, but the Suns being able to get out of the gates with two, not only forget the national TV side, but just having two big games that they will want to get up for, that their first two games of the season is obviously really big. And I know the Warriors game on Christmas wasn't necessarily like the biggest rivalry or something that Suns fans had a lot invested in. We don't really know what that team will look like this season. It depends on Klay Thompson and all the rest. But I really like that we're getting a few different Warriors-Suns nationally televised games. I see at least 3 on the page that I'm on. That's exciting. I mean, the Lakers is one thing. We already know that history is there. But this division is awesome. And I just kind of want to see the Suns tested against these divisional teams on the West Coast in these late night games as often as possible, because we know the Suns get up for those types of matchups, and I think we're going to get a lot of great games.
Yeah, and DeAndre Ayton's agent should be smiling from ear to ear, just because DeAndre has proven over like the last couple of years he plays a lot better on national TV. So now the volume is going to be a lot greater than usual. So hopefully he can bring it every night. But yeah, I think just the divisional games will be a lot of fun. The Pacific Division, like not that divisions really matter that much anymore, but it's by far the best division in basketball. I don't think anyone can really argue that at this point. So really looking forward to the West Coast games, and like it's going to have some Pac-12 after dark type vibes, hopefully, like throughout the season. But yeah, the Warriors and the Suns have never really had that, like, I guess, rivalry, just because the Warriors were really good when the Suns were really bad. And then this last season was kind of like a lost season in a way with Clay out as they're transitioning. But now that they're going to be full strength, hopefully, because the NBA needs, Clay and Steph to just get one last run, hopefully not at the Suns' expense, but just in terms of building new rivalries and stuff like that. So really looking forward to watching that.
Are there any, usually I dive in and I'm, long road trip, long homestand, everything else. I haven't really had the time to sit with that stuff yet. I think it becomes less important if you're a good team versus, the past couple of seasons where maybe we were thinking, oh, they'll take a step forward. What are the points in the schedule they can really take advantage of versus they might struggle? I don't really worry about that stuff. I just think they'll be pretty amazing in the regular season, no matter what, like we're about to talk about here to close the show out. But are there any stretches that caught your eye? Are there any little nuggets within the schedule that you want to take note of before we move on here?
So I think the main point that I noticed, at least, is just the beginning, like month and a half looks pretty easy, honestly. Like obviously there's those tough games like up front with like the Nuggets and Lakers and a couple more like sprinkled in. But for the most part, I think they have a great opportunity to just jump ahead, and their continuity is going to play a huge like factor in that. It's kind of like, they're not going to catch teams off guard either. So they're going to have a target on their back that they're not used to. But with the continuity and with like their long playoff run and all the chemistry they have, I think they're built to last throughout the regular season. So taking advantage of the early part of the schedule, I think, will be huge. Giving yourself some breathing room. And, it does get a little bit midway through the season and like kind of towards the end of the year, there's some tough stretches, but nothing really that stands out right now. I'm not really one to look too much into scheduling, because if you start overthinking it, it's just like, it's going to be like backwards of what you think is going to actually happen.
Yeah, nobody likes the radio bit of let's go game by game and pick win-loss, especially outside of the NFL. It's pretty much a nightmare to do that. So we will not be doing that here. But a couple of things that I will note. Again, I don't really note it to be like this is going to screw them up or I could see them losing or any of that stuff. It's more just interesting. One is they have 6 of their first 8 games at home. And then they don't have any real, like almost every season, I feel like, just because the Suns are so tucked away in the Southwest down here, they have one big trip where they'll go out east and play like every single Northeast team, Knicks, Nets, Celtics, all Raptors all the way through. And they don't really have that this year. They had one last season, and it was a really big breakthrough for them as a team. I think it can be that. I think that's usually that can be helpful to just have a big long road trip where you kind of have nothing better to do but like come together as a team a little bit if you're going to do that, if you're that type of team. So they don't have that. They do have some long road trips, but it's more scattered and random, not really that big swing up in the Northeast. And then I don't really like the end of the season. It's similar, I guess, for every team. I don't know. At least Arizona teams get stuck with this maybe once again because they are down here in their own little part of the country. But it just seems like they catch up on all the West Coast teams or Western Conference teams that they didn't get to play throughout the rest of the season. So you just have sort of a random mishmash of like Warriors, Grizzlies, Thunder, Lakers, and it's like home road for the last couple of weeks of the season. I just think that's not – we saw it this past season too, where they dropped that game to the Spurs and think people were, are they ready for the playoffs? It's just such an awkward end of the season, and it always seems to happen to them. But, again, they probably should have their seed, at least have a high seed wrapped up by then. I'm not worried about it from like a winning and losing standpoint. It always seems to screw with them, and it's less than ideal. But those are my last 2 takes. I don't know if you had anything.
Yeah, and the last one I noticed was just like I hate the back-to-backs against the same teams, especially this year. I noticed they had Utah and Dallas. They're actually not back-to-back nights, but they play them on back-to-back games, and they're both pairs of those games are on national TV as well. So it's going to be a little bit weird. I think by the time those second games roll around, you could see some like irresponsible takes from either fan base if there's a 2-0 or 0-2 showing on national TV. So that was just one thing that caught my eye.
You mean the Mavericks and Suns fan bases might have like some arguments during the season? That's impossible to believe.
Yeah, man, Utah. Who knows?
Well, yeah, that's true. Utah as well. I think it's weird scheduling too, just to have it be where fans like non-Mavericks and Suns fans or non-Jazz and Suns fans are going to want to watch the same teams go head-to-head, like back-to-back television nights. It's just, I personally wouldn't want to do that if it wasn't the team that I cared about. So it's a little awkward. I get why they're doing those. I do think it helps with travel, and some of it can be fun. Like we saw those Nuggets games in the Valley last year that we talked about constantly, where they really like learned a lot about themselves. So I think they can be helpful. It is just kind of weird to have them both on national TV, and it doesn't help the relationships between the fan bases. But that's all we got on the schedule. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we really start to preview the season. But because free agency's over for the most part, and I was waiting until that happened to do a show, sort of wrapping things up, seeing did the Suns get better? Did other teams get better? Where should they stand in the regular season mix next year? I think it's time. So we'll go ahead and do that right after this. Schedule's a nice way to jump off from that. First, though, a quick word from SweatBlock. SweatBlock is your little secret to confidence right in your back pocket. If you have a big presentation, maybe a new person you're meeting, maybe a date that you're going on, whatever it is, something that is going to result potentially in some unwanted sweat. SweatBlock solves that problem for you. It is doctor created, doctor recommended, works for up to 7 days per use, has been tested on firefighters, so you can tell it really works. It's not like a normal deodorant. It's like a wet nap or a washcloth. You wipe it underneath, or you wipe it wherever the moisture is coming from, stops it dead in its tracks. Over 13,000 reviews on Amazon. Bestseller for the past 10 years, so people have used this. They know it works. This is not a new product that you're taking a risk on. This is something people love because, once again, it is a secret to confidence that everyone can bring along. It's just a tiny little package. You bring it, you wipe it. You don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day. So you can wear what you want to wear because this thing, once again, small enough to put anywhere. Work bag, back pocket, toiletry bag, on a trip, whatever it may be. SweatBlock, once again, your little secret to confidence. If you or someone you love deals with this, could use a product like this, you have to check out SweatBlock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON. Once again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at sweatblock.com, or check them out at Amazon and CVS. Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline.ag. It's that time of year again. All eyes now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 survivor contest for the NFL, open now only at BetOnline. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. Wow, they are doubling it, really getting you guys excited for football. Usually it's just 50, 100% welcome bonus now. You don't want to miss this. Be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo by making a bet on the Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champion Bucs and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25 for new customers only when you use the promo code NFL100. Again, make a bet on that opening day game between the Bucs and the Cowboys, and your bet will be refunded even if you lose for up to $25 when you use the promo code NFL100. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, including the NFL, but not only that. You have basketball, boxing, hockey, baseball, whatever it might be. Take advantage of all the great offers throughout the 2021 season. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Brandon. The thing that I was thinking about a lot, just when it comes to the schedule, or to the standings rather, is, I don't know, the place to start for me is the injuries. Like, I think that there's an expectation that, the Suns, like, it's carried with them throughout the playoffs. They got lucky, right? Like, Jamal Murray's hurt, Kawhi Leonard. We talked about it throughout the playoffs, but that's not going away. Like, Murray, Leonard, these guys are still going to be out. And I think that's sort of where my mind goes first. And it's a boring way to start things off, but it impacts so much. Those two guys and more will miss the whole season. I think the Suns are really well positioned if they can just stay healthy and they're a little deeper to really be right where they were this past season.
Yeah, honestly, looking at the West, I think that is the main storyline right now is just the injuries, and it's going to affect the regular season and then potentially the playoffs, depending on how quick those guys can get back. But yeah, I think that's why I think continuity is like so important, and just getting your main rotation back is huge, and I think that's going to benefit the Suns. Especially compared to like a team like the Lakers, who they're going to try to integrate Westbrook and all these like new faces. And obviously I think they're going to be able to like out talent some teams in the regular season. But when it comes to like the playoffs and stuff like that, I think having that continuity going through this playoff run and all of last regular season, just getting a ton of reps in with each other is really going to benefit them. And that's why I think them and Utah both kind of, they're in that same category. I liked the move they did to add Rudy Gay. And I think it's going to be like a good fit for Utah. So I think Phoenix and Utah, to me, are probably the best, like the top 2 seeds in the regular season, with the Lakers like looming there at 3. And yeah, I think the Clippers and Nuggets are right there if they're full strength, obviously, in that tier, but they're not. So yeah, the West is going to be a complete mess to predict. And you got all these young teams too with like stars, Luka, Ja, Zion. So even De'Aaron Fox like could be ready for a leap. So it'll just be interesting to see like how like I think spots like 4 through like 10 end up.
It's a continuation of what I talked about on Friday. I did a big show on I did a show on the extensions for Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton, and I think just a lot of what's starting to set in around the NBA is some kind of the ramifications of what the league is like right now. And with the money stuff, it's very much big contracts, tradable contracts, free agency is quieting down. We're seeing, mostly deals, trades being the way that players move around, and teams being forced to focus on their flexibility on the trade market more than their necessarily just cap space flexibility. I think a big part of that also is with something like the standings and the schedule, because you're saying, and I agree with you, the Jazz and the Suns are 2 of the teams that probably are going to be right there again. That's obviously what we saw this past season. They were 1 and 2 in the Western Conference standings. And I know this point was made a little bit in the playoffs, especially with a team like the Nets, and they didn't ultimately end up winning, but I think we really would have heard that conversation if they did. And it is that the regular season and playoffs could not be more different now than they ever have been. Like we've always known, okay, you prove yourself in the playoffs, rings, culture, whatever points we've made in the past, that was always true. That's always been true. It's true in every sport. But I think now you're literally seeing it handled as entirely separate things. And so a team like the Suns with players who want to get out there because either they're young or in Chris Paul's case, they're just, disgustingly competitive and don't want to sit out. And then there's other teams that necessarily don't value the chemistry and continuity. They have players who are either injured, which is not their fault, or guys who just sit out periodically for rest and injury management and all that stuff. So it's such a broken, not broken like it doesn't work, broken like there's so much separation between how teams handle this stuff at this point, where I think the Suns are going to be well positioned again because of how their roster's built and everything else to just go out there. And like you said, they're going to have an advantage against bad teams. And then, they're probably going to be a lot of nights against good teams where we just don't see players who we might expect to see.
Yeah, especially at the end of the season when teams are just kind of already in playoff mode, like those veteran teams where they're just coasting and not really concerned about where they end up in the seeding as long as they have like home court or even just get a top 6 seed and avoid the play-in. So, yeah, I think the Suns will probably get home court advantage again. And I think that's pretty much like bearing injury. It's a pretty good chance it's going to happen. So that'll be important. But then obviously against the Lakers, like that's a team that I think you want to be in front of in the standings just in case you do face them in, the second round or the Western Conference Finals, and you have that home court advantage because we saw how important that was for them last year. So I think obviously, like you mentioned, the playoffs and regular season are completely different animals, and there shouldn't be like too many like major takeaways based off of like where they're seated, but it's all about like how they're playing coming into the playoffs and like what their health status is and stuff like that. So It's just survival of the fittest. I've said that a few times. That's what the playoffs are. There's going to be injuries every year to every team pretty much. So, I don't really put too much stock into the regular season in terms of like, because they were the 1 seed or the 2 seed, they're going to win this matchup or that matchup. It's just more about, what your team's looking like in the moment.
Yeah, I want to get into more of the, who got better, who got worse type of, maybe aside from just the regular season, how the Suns stack up in a second. The last thing, a point I'll make on this sort of bigger picture, and it's one that you just mentioned with the Lakers. I think that this season will just not be as screwed up as the last one. So yeah, there will be injuries and things will get wonky. That happens every year. There's going to be one team that's better than we think, one team that's worse, maybe more. We'll get to that. But I think it's less likely that you'll have a season where like the Suns end up playing the Lakers in the first round, or the Warriors are a wild card team that is threatening to break through into, the 7th or 8th seed. Surprisingly, I think it'll be more typical where the good teams are at the top, lesser teams are at the bottom. You want to get a higher seed, even if it's just for the first round being easier. Like, how nice would it have been if the Suns got to play, the Grizzlies in the first round or something like that this year, as opposed to what they had to go through. So that to me is something I'll definitely have my eye on going into the regular season, is just some sense of normalcy. The season starting on time, hopefully the amount of games, we don't have cancellations and this and that like we were used to last season, and things are just a little more chill, and it doesn't get as weird come playoff time. But let's do this sort of stock up, stock down stuff on some of these Western Conference teams at the very least. Maybe, talk about some title contenders as well. We'll see where it goes. Right after a quick word, though, from Rock Auto. Rock Auto makes car part buying easier. That's the bottom line. It's pretty much impossible going into a store these days, a dealership, heaven forbid, and wanting to get the right thing for the right price. You tell them what you want, you tell them what's broken, you tell them what you're looking for, and most likely what they're going to tell you right back is whatever's going to make them the most money. Well, Rock Auto keeps their prices consistent. They make it easy to find what you need, and they don't change things around on you based on if you're buying in bulk, if you're a pro, if you have a subscription. They don't require any of that. You just log on, type in the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, hit purchase, and it is at your door in days. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more on the same exact parts when you could go to Rock Auto and get through it in a breeze and save money? So if you need something for your car, and all of us do, go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Brandon. So the thing that I talked about with the Christmas Day game a little bit last week, because it made me look at the conference standings, like who's the most likely to win the West. I don't know if you've seen, but the Warriors are second. In most places, it goes Lakers, Warriors, Suns. And obviously, if we just compare that to last year's standings, it's very puzzling. So I guess we can start with the Warriors, because I do think they're the team sort of most likely to junk things up compared to last year. How do you feel about them going into the season? Do you feel like we should be taking that as like another bona fide Western Conference threat, or do you want to see it first?
So I definitely wouldn't put any of my own money on those odds for them. That's for sure. I do think if they are at full strength, though, they're a legitimate title contender, but that's a major if, because Clay, it's not like he's just missed one season. He's coming off of, multiple like freak injuries. So, obviously I think the NBA is a better place when he's healthy. And I think everyone misses just watching him play. He's arguably the greatest shooter of all time. So yeah, I think they're definitely a contender. I think Wiggins is a nice role piece too. That's kind of flourished a little bit there. Draymond's going to Draymond and Steph. This could be his last run, honestly. So I think you have to take them serious, especially in a playoff series. If they're at full strength, they're a team that I wouldn't want to face. But at the same time, it's there's a lot of hurdles for them to clear. And what version of Clay are we going to get? What is there going to be any declines out of Draymond or even Steph at this point? How are they going to mesh? They have a lot of young guys too. So relying on rookies as a contender sometimes cannot be the best route to go, even though I do like both of their rookies. But yeah, I think they're still kind of more of a question mark than a surefire contender. But if they are like on paper, just 100%, then they're definitely a team that can win a title.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that would scare me the most about them, and I think Wiggins has become underrated. I think people just, like to clown him and he makes too much money and this and that. But like, the max he signed is not on the high end of contracts at this point, and it doesn't even matter what he makes because I think he's a pretty good player. So I think they have like a top 4 that's pretty good. They've always been able to interchange centers without much of an issue. It's like they have that institutional knowledge that I think has to scare you, because we're talking about the Jazz and the Suns and the Nuggets having this continuity and that helped them in the regular season. Well, I think the Warriors have that if they can get their guys back together. We'll have to see again whether they can and how that looks and whether the other guys can provide enough to get them there. I tend to agree with you about the Warriors, though, and that was similar to what I said last week, which is just, I think honestly, my hunch is that the odds makers are putting it there because people like to bet on the Warriors and they want to make some money. So they're going to go ahead and make those odds pretty juicy. But we talked about the Lakers and the integration of Russ, and that'll be a really big experiment. Not only Russ, but almost their whole roster looking different this season. The Clippers and Nuggets have those injuries. The Jazz, I think, will be pretty much right there in the mix again. Maybe they'll get a little healthier by the end of the season. But who else stands out to you in the West? There really wasn't a lot of changeover in the Western Conference. A lot of the moves and differences that we might see for the next regular season is, I think, going to come in the East. But who you got in the West that's interesting you?
So I think the Jazz are kind of like that same team as last year where, I think they're built for the regular season. Can they get it done in the playoffs? Like, I'm not sure, but they're a team that I think if the Suns ended up playing them in the playoffs, that would have been a really fun playoff series. They're just one of those teams that they kind of need a leap out of either Mitchell or Gobert, which I think he kind of is what he is at this point. So it's tough to see them really making any like serious noise. And then the Clippers, I think, obviously just comes down to Kawhi's health. If he's healthy, they're a title contender. If he's not, then they're still a good team. We saw that. Like they battled the hell out of the Suns, so they're still a really good team. But they need Kawhi to enter that status. And same with Jamal Murray and the Nuggets. I think I would have them as the title contender if they are at full strength. So, and it looks like he's going to play this season, sometime towards the end of the season or maybe playoffs. But it's going to be interesting to see how they integrate that young core too. So I think obviously Suns fans will point to the fact that they swept them, but with Murray, it's a completely different series. I think everyone knows that. So they're a team to watch for sure. But as you can see, the common trend here is just a bunch of question marks and injuries at the top of the West. So that's kind of what the storyline is going to be all year long.
You mentioned the young teams as well, and I think to me one of the most interesting parts of the West. I think the Wolves, the Wolves, they're going to try to win, so I won't put them in there. I think the Thunder and the Rockets for sure are tanking. I don't really buy what the Wolves and the Kings did necessarily, or the Spurs to get better. So I feel like those teams are going to probably round out the bottom of this stuff as well. Maybe push for the play-in, but probably not make it. So I think you're looking at, can the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, or I would throw the Mavericks in there too, who we don't necessarily think of as a young team, but haven't necessarily made that full-on leap. And I think that's the team to me that will, because the Grizzlies sort of took a sideways step. The Pelicans, I just have so many questions about them, and their roster still doesn't seem totally put together. I mean, I think Willie Green will help, but how much can one coach do for a roster that doesn't make sense? So I wonder, do you think this might be the year we see the Mavericks really jump? Because I like the Reggie Bullock signing. Obviously, Tim Hardaway, I think, has continued to get better as a player. And Luka just seems so in control. Even what we saw from him in the Olympics, I just think he's still just tapping into what he can be. I still feel like he can be like a LeBron, Harden offense unto himself. He basically has been that. But as the role players around him continue to get a little bit better, I just wonder if we're in for this, at least in the regular season this year, just a full unleashing of Luka that we didn't really see because their season was so strange last year.
I'm not as high on their supporting cast, to put them in that top tier, but I do think I could definitely see them as a 4 seed or going on some crazy tears throughout the West, because they do have that little bit of continuity with their rotation. And I did Bullock signing as well. And Porzingis. I
just wonder though, the injuries though, we're talking about something if the Clippers drop, if the Nuggets drop, the Mavs were the 5th team in the West last year. could they slide up a few rungs and maybe, start to compete for home court advantage? I think that's realistic.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely think right now I'd probably have them as like them and Golden State, like as a 4 seed. Like right now I have like Phoenix, LA, and Utah, the Lakers as like the top 3, I think. And then after that, there's like a little bit of like a drop off just in terms of how like my confidence level, and Dallas is in that next tier. So I definitely could see them as like a 4 seed, anywhere from that 4 to like 7 range. I don't think they'll be a play-in team as long as they're healthy, but yeah, I think they're, like you mentioned, like the Grizzlies kind of I didn't like their offseason or the Pelicans, even though I like both their young cores and like their long-term future. Like in terms of like right now, I don't think either team really
feels like they're being too patient. They're almost like, it's like, okay, it's year 3 for Ja and Zion. Like, what are we doing here? Like, you see the Mavs are already sort of like, damn, what are we doing with Luka? We need to win. And then it's like Memphis and New Orleans are like, yeah, no worries. We got our draft picks and we're cruising. It's like, I don't know if that's the right call. I mean, they'll both be in the mix, I think. But yeah, it was a weird summer for both of them. Yeah,
and the Spurs just look like they're trying to just go 500 with that roster. Like, I just don't understand what they're doing. I mean, I do like some of their young pieces, but it's just kind of a weird team. And then the Kings, I think, are like my dark horse team that I think could take a leap. I think De'Aaron Fox had a really like underrated like end to last season, and they have some interesting pieces if they can figure it out. And they were pretty close to the playing game last year, so I think they could take a step forward. The Wolves.
Did they get a new coach? Did they hire somebody new to be their coach? Because otherwise,
that is definitely the thing that's holding them back. But we'll have to see. Them and the Wolves, I think, have been kind of the trendy picks of like taking that next step. But I'm not really super confident in either of those teams. Like, I think the Wolves have a lot of talent, but their roster is just a little weird and kind of doesn't really mesh. But I think the West is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it'll be more competitive because, again, I was about to make a list of all these teams. Oh, they'll all be bad. But then I was cutting teams in real time, as I was saying it a minute ago, because I don't actually think, the Wolves have wanted to tank or have accidentally tanked and whatever for a while. But I think Finch is a decent coach, the guy that they hired last year. And then, I think they'll have an offense. I think they'll probably be able to be in the top half of the league offensively if they really want to be. And then, it's the Kings and the Wolves both. It's like who can defend, who can improve on defense just enough to maybe crack in there. Because maybe the Spurs won't be in the play-in mix. Maybe the Grizzlies do slip a bit, and there's some openings there. The play-in makes all of this obviously way more interesting. But that's neither here nor there for the Suns. Obviously, that might be their first round opponent, but other than that, it won't matter. So I wanted to go to the East really quick to close things out because, again, I think the majority of the moves that really excited and interested me in the offseason were in the East. And I probably would say Kyle Lowry moving to the Heat was the most momentous deal that happened this offseason. I mean, there was some stuff with the Bulls, but, you're talking about the 11th seed maybe getting a little bit better. That's not super important for the grand scheme of the league right now. So I kind of look and it's like, okay, so you probably have the Lakers and the Nuggets if they can get healthy and the Clippers if they can get healthy. But really, like, if you're looking at it right now, I would say the Lakers are the Suns' biggest threat in the West. And I might even say, like, the majority of the rest of the top 5 comes from the East. Like, I think the Nets and the Bucks would be my next 2 teams. And then you could convince me, Miami and Philly. We'll see what happens with Ben Simmons, but like those teams probably in a vacuum scare me more than most of the West. And I guess that's good from a perspective of the playoffs being a little easier on the Suns, but it just means it's hard to root for one championship if you're saying, okay, best case scenario, the Suns are in the finals again. Who do you want them to face? It's like, damn, there's a lot of teams I really don't want the Suns to have to face out East.
Yeah, I think the East finally caught up a little bit to the West in terms of like just top like premier talent. It's a little top heavy. Like I think the West is more balanced, but obviously the injuries play a major factor too. So like a healthy Nuggets and Clippers team kind of balances that out. But I really liked what Chicago did this offseason too. They have a lot of talent. We'll see how it like comes together. That's still kind of up in the air. But Philadelphia, I mean, Ben Simmons workout videos, they're never going to end. So we'll see about them. I like their team, but there's kind of like meh. But I think the top 3 of like Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Miami are like definitely all 3 title contenders. Miami might surprise some people with me being that confident in them, but that team's going to be absolute hell to play in a playoff series. Like, they just have like the most hardworking dudes, and Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, Jimmy Butler, Bam. They got some really good shooters in Hero and Duncan Robinson. So they're a team that I think if they upset like the Bucks or Nets, or it wouldn't be that much of a surprise to me in a playoff series. So
they just did it 9 months ago, right? They surprised us once, and it's the same group, and they have that cohesion. So I think I agree with you. I think they'll be right there. I think people just want to talk about the Nets a lot, and they don't like consider that it's like, well, the Nets, the worst case scenario just happened to them. Like, we don't even have to imagine that much of, oh, well, how can a team with that many stars not win the championship? Like, that's already becoming a question. And it's like, well, you can just look back. Like, we just saw that happen. I don't think it's likely that 2 of those guys get hurt again, but it's not, the craziest thing to imagine. And they have dealt with injuries. It's not a fluke. So I think the East is pretty open. My question for you to close things out would be, bringing things back to the Suns. We've talked about all the Western Conference and the guys that the teams they might face in the West on a potential repeat run. Again, that's best case scenario. I'm not saying let's etch that into stone. It's going to happen. We've talked about the East, who they might be scared of. Do you feel like the Suns are like? Do you feel better about their ability to compete with the top of the league and make a push than maybe you did heading into the playoffs? Like, do you feel like they're better equipped for a long playoff run, even though they just did it? But we know the sort of reasons why they were able to pull it off the first time. Do you feel more confident about their group and their ability to do that now after this free agency offseason period?
I wouldn't say more confident in terms of like, I think they can get to the finals as I did last year, because I really obviously they caught some breaks and things went their way and whatnot. But I think in terms of just their young core developing and gaining that experience together, like if they do get back there again, then yes, I do think they have a better chance of actually pulling it off. And, losing those 4 straight games, like obviously it sucked in the moment, but that's something that I think you could take as a lesson for a young team like that, to never get complacent. And you have to just kind of remind yourself how young this team is. Like, they're, one of their most important players in the playoffs is 22 years old, and DeAndre Ayton, and Mikal Bridges and Booker both 24, and it's just a very young team that has a lot, has gained a lot of experience in such a short amount of time that I think they're going to be better for it in the long run, whether they get back this year or the year after. I think this experience will be very valuable. So if they can get through the gauntlet again and get there, then I like their chances. But at the same time, there's some really, really good teams out East. So it'll be another battle.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I would say, and it's hard to quantify because we just don't know right now what it will look like, and we'll start to piece it together, but it's a full season thing, is just how much better can the young guys get? Because I think that's obvious, but it's also a question that not a lot of teams are really facing. I mean, most other contenders, it's sort of how will they fit? Will the role players be better? Are they healthier? But like, aside from the Suns, you maybe have the Sixers, the Hawks, maybe the Bucks, but I don't really think of the Bucks as a team that's going to like internally improve much. The Nuggets, I suppose, because their guys are pretty young. The Mavs, like there's just not a lot of other teams that you might say, have a puncher's chance at the title who actually could just get a lot better outside of their additions and just make a leap from players improving. And that's what's so exciting about this Sun season. And we'll obviously have more to talk about. We're far from done previewing things. We'll get that into full motion at the end of next month. But just with the dust clearing, I thought that was a good, a good moment in time to take a snapshot. We'll see if anything changes between now and training camp. But any last thoughts for the folks on where they should put their money? You said you wouldn't put it on the Warriors, but maybe you can tell people how to. Are we going all in on the Suns? Is this repeat time back to the finals? Are you ready to punch that in?
I wouldn't put my own money, because then if they don't make it, it's a double loss. I never bet on my own team for that reason. But in terms of like taking overs for like regular season stuff, I think the Suns and Jazz finishing in the top 2 is like something I would look at. And just looking at what their win projections are going to be, I'm pretty confident those 2 teams are going to be at the top again. So if you do want to make a bet like that, don't yell at me if you end up losing. But those are the 2 teams I think just in terms of familiarity and like going through an 82 game season, should come out on top in the West again.
Yeah, I think that's the same reason I don't have any Cardinals on my fantasy football team. It hurts too bad to lose 2 times on a Sunday. But that'll close us out today, guys. You can read Brandon over at Bright Side of the Sun or at his site, Zona Hoops. Make sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel as well, building up his stuff too with some great breakdowns and all that. So make sure to check that out. We'll be back all week. Got some big guests coming up. I believe we're going to have Srikar of Suns Twitter and Kevin Ray coming on. So making it worth your while here on YouTube as we get things going. Do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to listen to the podcast if that's your preference. But wherever you are, hit that follow or subscribe button. We'll be here all month, every single day. And then in September, maybe slow things down a little bit before we get to training camp, but not going anywhere. Enjoy your Monday, folks. Enjoy the beginning of your week, and I'll be back tomorrow.